Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tips, tools, and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. Today I have returning guest Liam Naden. Liam is an experienced marriage and relationship coach, speaker, and author of more than 20 books, including his most recent, Marriage Uncounseling, a counterintuitive approach to healing relationships and bringing back love. Liam is also the host of the Growing in Love for Life podcast. Welcome, Liam. It's a pleasure to have you back on the show again.
Hi, Tonya. Thanks very much for having me.
So the last time I had you on the show, we talked about the brain and the subconscious mind. And today we're going to switch gears a little bit because we're going to talk about relationships and marriage and love. And I'm sure many of us at some point can say, I've lost that loving feeling in a relationship. I know I have been able to say that. And so, and we didn't know how to get it back. So Liam, what is the reason why we have problems in our relationships, specifically our most intimate relationships?
Well, that's a really interesting question, isn't it? I'm sure everyone would like to know the answer. And the problem with looking for the answer is what people are doing is they're trying to find the solution to individual problems. But problems are not, you don't find the solution to a problem by focusing on the problem. You find the solution to a problem, and this isn't just for relationships, but it's very true for relationships. You find the solution to a problem by identifying and rectifying the cause of the problem. You know, it's a little bit like, I've used this analogy before with I don't know if I have with you, but if you come into your house one day and there's a crack on the wall, you might look at it and say, I have a problem. I better go out and find out how to repair the crack, and you buy all the materials and you work out how to do it, or you get someone else to do it. And you think the problem is solved. But the next day you come in and there's two cracks on the wall. and again, you repair them. And you carry on, all of your time and energy and effort is spent repairing the cracks in the wall without realizing what is causing the cracks to show up in the first place. And if you actually address that, then which is the foundations of the house, obviously, when you fix those, now they're going to take a bit more effort and a bit more time and money. But once it's done, it's done. You don't need to keep rushing around trying to fix the cracks. So it's the same with a relationship. So what is the cause of all problems in relationships? It's one thing, and it's that people don't show up to their relationship as their authentic self. Now, what does that really mean? What is your authentic self? Your authentic self is who you really are, the greatness of who you are. And the only way you can show up, or the thing that's preventing you from showing up to a relationship or to your life, and therefore creating problems, is one thing, and that's fear. Remember the last time we talked about fear and the effect that that has on the brain. But when you feel any fear about your relationship, you're not going to be your true, authentic self, and things are going to go wrong.
Yeah. And so when you're not being your authentic self, you're putting on a facade or a mask, right? And so as time goes on in the relationship, your authentic self comes out, but oftentimes, you know, people, your partner will look at you like, who is that person? And I noticed that I was married for 10 plus years, actually, Liam. And it got to a point in the relationship where we just weren't connecting like we had in the beginning. And I look back, I was very young when I got married. I was in my early 20s, and I was not being my authentic self when I was in that relationship. And so, you know, looking back at that time, it's so funny to be able to look back in hindsight and say, wow, I was a very, kind of immature, naive gal, you know, back then, because I was not standing in my power. I was not standing in my true authenticity. And personally, I don't even think that my ex-husband at the time, I don't even think that he even saw who I was, you know? And so, you know, we moved on in that relationship, and at the nearing the end of the relationship, we actually opted to seek some counseling, okay, which is very common in a lot of relationships when we get to that point, right? And so for me, it it wasn't as beneficial as I would have hoped it to be. It was very costly and it was very time consuming. And unfortunately, it did end in divorce in that relationship. But looking back at that now and understanding the subconscious mind, I was allowing a lot of societal programs to kind of influence that relationship. Needing to get married at a certain time, I felt kind of forced into it a little bit, feeling the pressure to have children and whatnot. And so, Liam, you talk a lot about marriage uncounseling, right? So can someone save their marriage or their relationship without counseling?
Well, I think you've alluded to the answer just in saying that you tried it and it was expensive and time consuming and it didn't work. And probably 80%, I'd say, of the people who come to me for help that I know of, a lot of people buy my coaching programs without interacting with me personally. But of the people who talk to me, probably 80% say, if they've been to counseling, well, it didn't help. And a large number of those people actually also say it actually made things worse. So that's one of the reasons why I talk about marriage uncounseling, because there is definitely a different approach. And what I've found, it is actually, from my experience, and this isn't to denigrate any counselors, there's some wonderful people out there and very competent and effective people, working in counseling. But just from my experience and the people I've talked to, it's not a very effective way of dealing with problems. And I think the main reason is just what you were talking about in your own marriage. What was the biggest, all of the problems that you had, and I hope you don't mind me using you as an example.
No, I think I'm being vulnerable and putting myself out there. So yeah, use me as an example.
But all of the problems that you had were the result of the fears that you had about that relationship, which were things like, if I end this relationship, which were about the ending the relationship. Mm-hmm. You had a fear of ending it because it might have been maybe even before you got married or at any stage in the marriage, you might have been thinking, this isn't right for me. And I really feel on a gut level, this isn't right for me, or it's not working. Now, if you were acting without fear, you would go, well, it's not right for me. The thing to do is to move on, or the thing to do is to be honest with my husband or my wife and say, this isn't working. We've got to do something different. I'm not happy. But all of the fears of what other people might think, of the expectations of society, what you might think of yourself, you might think, I'd be a failure if I ended this marriage. I'd feel a failure. I would have all these regrets about my life. Other people would criticize me. I would feel that I hadn't tried hard enough. And I'll look back at the end of my life and thought, well, maybe if I just tried a bit harder, I could have saved that marriage. Now, they're all fears, and they're all fears that not only keep people in the wrong relationship, but they also keep you doing the wrong things, which is holding on to that relationship, being needy, needing it to work, trying to make it work, rather than just saying, well, my life's perfect. This is an experience. It's not meant to be, so I'll move on to the next one. Now, when I say this, sometimes people have, oh, that's a terrible attitude to have. If everyone had that attitude, no, the average marriage would last for about a week. But that's
in the States, probably true. 2 days. No.
Because what I've found with people who have great relationships, and I've done a lot of study in comparing a small group of people relatively who have really good relationships, it flourishes and gets better with time, and they've been together 30 years and they're still passionate about each other and they don't have problems, compared to the majority of relationships whose marriages that struggle and people are struggling. And the people in really great relationships, they have no fear about their relationship, and they actually have no fear about it ending. And that's actually the key to longevity in a relationship, is to say, if at any time it's not working for either of us on a core level, not just on we can sort out some superficial problems, but if any time we're really honest with ourselves and say, this is no longer right for me, then I can walk away from it and I'll be fine. And I don't have all these fears about what might happen to me or my family or whatever if I did make that decision. And that allows you to be your authentic self in that relationship. So these are the strongest relationships, because people are going, well, I'm here because I want to be. If it doesn't work out now or at any time in the future, that's fine. It's all meant for the best, and I'll be okay, and everyone else will be okay. That's when you can be happy, relaxed, open, honest, and enjoying just being there. And the interesting thing as well is that's what you were like when you first got into that relationship.
Yeah, you're right.
You were just being, you didn't have any fears about it. You were just enjoying being there. You weren't worried about, oh, what will people think if this person I met yesterday I don't go on and marry and I don't stay with? You weren't thinking that. You're just enjoying it. You were being your authentic self. So that's the state you have to be in if you want longevity in your relationship. And it might not be the right relationship for you, or it might be. But if you have a fear attached to it, you're going to create problems.
Wow, that hits home with me specifically, Liam, because my dad, I remember before I got married, before the day of my wedding, he said, now, Tone, yes, he calls me Tone, marriage is forever. You know, he goes, are you really ready to step into this? Well, that put pressure on me. And I got into that marriage and I knew within a few years, even a year probably, Liam, if I'm being honest with myself, that it wasn't the right fit for me. And I held on for 9+ more years because I didn't want to let my dad down, you know? And so I kind of gave him hell a little bit after I got out of that marriage. He's like, why'd you hold on for so long? I said, because of you. You made that statement to me. And I do feel that our families can play a significant role in that too, in that fear that you talk about, and that fear of letting someone else down in that relationship. I was not being my authentic self in that relationship. However, my family lived 3,000+ miles away. They had no idea what was even going on in my relationship. But yet my sister lived 20 minutes away and she really didn't even know what was going on in that relationship. So yeah, I think that the fear of what others may think, he was raised in a very strict Southern Baptist family. So he had a fear. It actually got to the point in that marriage where he was really pushing me to want to end it first because he was fearful of ending it. Right. So I think, you know, just hitting on this button of fear is significant when it comes to our relationships.
It's at the core of everything. And what happens when we're afraid is we come up with all of these ideas that have been programmed into us from a young age that are told to us the truth, which are, well, all relationships are difficult. You can't have a perfect marriage. You're always going to have problems. You need to work through your problems. None of those things are true. There are marriages that don't have problems. There are marriages where people just enjoy being in it, where they're not working on their marriage, where they don't have this mindset. You know, people say to me, I'm prepared to work on my marriage. There's no fun in working on your marriage. Working, most people don't like the sound of work.
Exactly.
Instead of working on your marriage, you should say, I'm going to give it my authentic self. And if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. Mm-hmm. And get rid of all of these fears and worries about what other people might think, what you might think, what might happen to you in the future. You know, people have a lot of fear about, well, I need to stay here because otherwise I'd be on my own and I'd never find anyone as good. And all right, this person is a 70% good. You know, I can put up with all of the things I don't like about them when you actually can't, but you're just justifying it to yourself. Why not find a 100% person? You can only do that if you let go of your fear instead of saying, I'll never find anyone as good. No one will ever love me. I'll be on my own. I won't know what to do. You know, that's just the wrong. All of those fears are just, firstly, not true. And they're what's holding you back. And I've spoken to people who've been in marriages for 30 years and been miserable for most of it. Yeah. And they've never been able to let go. And they've always been trying to justify it. I'll find the answer. I'll fight for my marriage. I'll never give up. Unfortunately, those are all the wrong things to say because they just keep you in a prison. You can't force a square peg into a round hole.
That's funny. I was just going to say that. You just telepathically read my mind.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
And this marriage is forever thing. Who came up with that idea? Really? It's just an idea that we've all bought into. It doesn't have any basis in reality. It's a little bit like with a job. I say to people, have you had more than one job in your life? They say, yeah, I've had a few. Well, when you were in a job that you weren't happy with, what did you think? And they'd say, well, I thought I'd be happy in that job and I really gave it a good, you know, a lot of effort, but then I realized it was the wrong job for me, so I went and got another one. That's being sensible. But somehow
and it's following your alignment, right? It's following how you feel in that alignment, and having an understanding that, you know, sometimes relationships aren't meant to be forever. Sometimes they're there to help us grow and to, you know, I know I look back at my marriage and I know that was to help me connect with a higher version of me. That was to help me get my confidence back and to step out on my own. And I know you talked about the fear of, if I leave this relationship, what does it look like after that? And I know with a lot of my clients that I work with around that topic, there's such fear, especially people who've been married for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You know, what does my life look like without this person in it? And that's a legitimate fear.
You know, you've got a beautiful background there of a river in Norway. I know you're telling me it's in Norway. I don't know if listeners probably can't see it, but what you've captured there is how nature and we are supposed to work, which is going with a flow, going with life, not creating resistance, because a river flows perfectly. All of nature flows, has a flow that's perfect. And when you meet resistance, you don't, the river doesn't fight the resistance, it goes around it. Its perfection is staying in the flow. And we're designed to be like that as well. We're not supposed to have obstacles and problems in our life. We only create those when we don't go with the flow. When we try and, you know, look at a big rock in front of us and say, well, I'm not going to go around it. I need to fight my way through it. But that's not natural. So when we learn to trust, and that comes back to what I was talking about last time about the brain, when we learn to trust who we are and how we're designed biologically to have a perfect life, to go with the flow, then you adapt naturally to your circumstances. The right things happen and you don't end up with problems. Problems are only the result when you're trying to fight against something.
Absolutely. So can you create a problem-free relationship? Is that possible, Liam?
Absolutely. I know of them. Totally. And they're the ones that are great relationships.
Yeah. I mean, you look at Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell. I always like to look at them, and, you know, they've been together. They've never been married, but they've been in a committed relationship for, gosh, 40 plus years probably. And so there are relationships out there that work really well, you know, and I know, looking back at my relationship, one of the major areas of concern for me was miscommunication. I always either felt like I wasn't being heard, and I'm sure he felt like he wasn't being heard either. So, you know, Liam, what is the secret to effective communication within a relationship?
That's a really good question as well. In fact, I've got a whole chapter about that in my book, Marriage Uncounseling. But here's the thing about communication. And, you know, it doesn't exactly puzzle me, but it makes me feel a bit sad that people make communication so complicated. Because one of the clues to know how to create effective communication in a relationship, as in any other aspect of your relationship, whether it's intimacy, connection, you know, joy and happiness, is to think back to the early days and say, what was going on then when the communication was really good? That's not happening now. And the fundamental thing about communication, you don't need to learn a technique. You don't need to learn about somebody's, you know, brain psychology or beliefs or values or how they, whatever it is. You don't need to learn any of that sort of stuff, because you didn't know any of that sort of stuff when you first got together in the relationship, but when things were going really well. All you need to do, if you want to communicate well, is to make yourself someone that they want to communicate with. It's as simple as that. So in other words, you make yourself attractive. You make yourself the sort of person that they can trust, that they can feel good around. Now, and what that really means, you know, sometimes people say to me, my wife's having, or I'm having problems in my marriage, but I can't talk to my wife about it. Yeah. Now, why can't you talk to your wife about it? Because she'd get really upset. So that's why the communication isn't there. And it's not that he doesn't want to communicate. It's just he doesn't feel safe communicating because of what her reaction would be. And why would she get upset? Because she's afraid. She's afraid that if he says something that she doesn't agree with, then it's going to be some terrible thing, the end of their marriage, or you know whatever it is. So again, this comes back to your fear. When you have no fear that what you say to the other person is going to hurt you, in other words, that they're going to get upset, and what they might say to you is not going to upset you either, then you both can say anything. And that's where effective communication comes in. That's what effective communication is. It's the ability to say anything that you feel and have the other person understand it. And they will only understand it if they want to understand it. So, for example, you might say to your, your wife, husband, I'm really not happy in our relationship, and I'm thinking about going off with somebody else. Now, if their reaction was, now what I'm hearing is you're not happy in the relationship and you're thinking of going with someone else, I understand that. I understand that, that if that's what you want to do, well, maybe we need to talk it through and what it is. Then they're going to be open and honest, and the other person might say, so tell me a bit more about what you're not happy about in our relationship and what's not working. Okay, and they'll tell you, okay, that makes sense. So then that's when effective communication happens. And if somebody doesn't understand, they say, tell me a bit more. What do you mean by that? I really want to know what you mean. I don't quite understand. Tell me in different ways. How can I understand what you're saying? Isn't that great communication? Whereas if they were to say something like, I want to leave, and the other person went, oh, you can't.
Are you cheating on me? What's wrong with you?
I'll be so upset. I can't live without you. I love you. And you think that person is going to want to communicate? No, they're not, because they're saying that person isn't interested in what I'm actually saying or how I feel. They're just worried about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And why are they worried about themselves? Because they have this fear around the relationship. So the key, if you want to be a good communicator and you want your spouse to communicate well with you, say, how can I be the sort of person that they would want to communicate with? How can I be a person that's not going to be upset with them when they tell me how they feel? Or do something that I don't agree with? Because here's the thing, if they say something that you don't like, or they do something you don't like, it's actually not about them. It's about you. Why don't you like it? Why do you allow them to do or say what they want to do? That's what if you really respect the other person, you will allow them to say or do what they want to do. So it's as simple as that. So in other words, communication isn't working on some technique to get them to manipulate the other person or get them to do or think something you want them to do. It's about going within yourself and saying, what fears can I get rid of about my relationship that would make me worry about what might or might not be communicated between us?
Wow, that's really powerful. And, I know just in my circumstance, learning how to listen was very effective in that process as well. My ex-husband wasn't much of a communicator. He was more of an introverted kind of quiet type. And so when we would communicate, I would kind of overtake the conversation because I was a quick, faster kind of communicator. So I had to learn to literally step back and take 5-second pause for him to respond, because I would respond before he had a chance to respond. So I love that, because it's so important to have a calming presence when you go in to have these, these conversations too. I know with me, if I was all fired up, then I knew that the conversation wasn't going to work out the way that either one of us had planned. But if we go in with a calming presence and a consciousness about it, and awareness that we're both going to communicate, our needs, and we're both going to listen to one another, I think that's key too. And that's just based off of my experience. But
and not be worried about what happens. Again, it comes down to that fear. If you just want to communicate, and if you hear something you don't like, well, that's your problem. Yeah. Remember when my current relationship, we've been together 14 years now, and it was very different when I started to do a lot of work on myself after I lost everything and became homeless, and tried to realize that whatever I was doing wasn't giving me the right results. I attracted to me quite a different person for a relationship than I'd ever had before. And very early on after we met, we were having a conversation, and my whole thing had been, I was always worried about what the person, because I'd had experiences where the other person wasn't happy about me being honest and communicating, and getting upset if I tried to express how I truly felt. So I remember saying to my partner, well, how do you feel about this? And is that all right?
You were fishing a little.
And he said, look, can we just get one thing straight? You worry about what you think, and I'll worry about what I think. A deal? And I thought that was the most amazing thing at that time anyone had said to me. But it's so true. And if you have a relationship based on that, you realize that your reaction to anything is your problem.
Yeah. And I love that, because you brought up how you were bringing in programming from previous relationships into this new relationship. And I think many of us do that. It's like, I did that after I got out of that marriage. I was walking on eggshells with several relationships after that. But then I got to a point where I started, like you, to realize I need to be my authentic self, and I will attract someone who loves me for me. And then that's when I did. It was literally like this quintessential Hallmark moment when I met this person. And it was like, oh my gosh, like this light bulb went off that someone can love me for me, because that relationship prior to that, but yet he was loving someone that wasn't me, but that was my fault, because I was going into it not being myself, and that was creating him to not be himself. So really, when we are taking the baggage from one relationship into another relationship, and trying to fix that, it's funny because the law of attraction will bring those types of things into our life that need to be healed. And until we do the work, like you said, you did the work on yourself, or you started to do the work, that's when you attracted someone completely different into your reality.
Yeah, because the question you really have to ask yourself is, instead of trying to attract somebody with, writing down a list of, well, you can write down a list of the qualities you want, but the question you really have to ask yourself is, what sort of person do I need to be to attract the sort of person that I really want? So if I want someone who's loving, honest, open, communicating, exciting, doesn't get upset with anything, I can tell anything that's within my heart, my deepest secrets to them, and they will make me feel good about it. That's the sort of person you need to be. And when you just focus on becoming that person, that other person will show up. And if you're already in a relationship, you focus on turning yourself, which is your authentic self, again, without your fears, into being the best version of yourself. And one of two things will happen. Your current relationship will either fade away because the person is not right for you, or they will adjust, if you like, and mirror you. It's all about mirroring yourself. So
Really
that's why it's all about, there's no such thing as a relationship with someone else, really. But it's only a relationship with yourself.
So true. It's so true. It's like
every other relationship is a reflection of your relationship with yourself.
Absolutely. And once you have a deeper understanding or knowledge of that, all of your relationships shift, your work relationships, your friendships, your intimate relationships. You're like, wow, that is mirroring something back to me that I know that I've got to work on within me. And then once you do that, you shift your frequency, you shift your vibration, and then you will attract differently into your life. And so, Liam, many of us in relationships have lost attraction, right? Lost attraction or lost that passion. And we have a tendency to want to walk away from that. So, what advice can you give to those who may have lost that loving feeling and they want to find the passion again in their life or in their relationship?
Well, again, that's pretty simple, because people have all these techniques, and they, sometimes people say to me, my wife's not responding, so maybe I should take her out for dinner, or buy her some flowers, or take her on a trip, or, say I love you, or whatever it is. And they try all these things and they get no response, or a negative response. In fact, sometimes people, when you're overly kind to them and you haven't been, they get suspicious and say, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Maybe, if you're having trouble in your relationship and maybe your husband or wife wants to leave, and you start showering them with affection and gifts, all they're going to think is they don't want me to leave because they're afraid of what would happen to them if I did leave. And all they're doing is trying to manipulate me and get me to change my mind, so that as soon as I do, then they'll go back to the person they were before with all of our problems. So they're suspicious, and it doesn't work to do that. But here's the thing, and again, it was a question I thought of about people in great relationships versus, say, the majority, is what keeps attraction. And what it is, here's a simple question you need to ask yourself. Not yourself, but everyone ask themselves. What was I doing and not doing early on in our relationship when things were going really well? What was I doing then that I'm not doing now? Because that's when and things are usually like, I wasn't criticizing. I wasn't telling them things that they shouldn't do. I was listening to them. I was praising them, complimenting them, saying, you know, you're the most amazing person I've ever met. I'm so lucky to be with you. And you did that so well. That was fantastic. Gosh, you're just so amazing. Simple things like we were smiling at each other. You know, sometimes say to people, when's the last time you smiled? Just a genuine smile, not some cheesy thing, but just a genuine smile at your husband or your wife and said, you know, you're really great. Or sharing a funny story. You know, sometimes you find a funny video on YouTube, or you see something funny in the street, and you make them laugh. And some people who say to me, well, it's been years since I smiled. You know, these are such basic things. So when you really think about what was I doing then, and you weren't criticizing, you know, so many relationships now are full of arguments. What's the simplest way to end an argument? Just stop. Just say, I don't want to argue. It's not getting anywhere. But people think, no, I need to get my point across, or I need to I need to feel good by winning this argument. Well, they're not listening to me. Again, the communication thing. I need to explain it to them more. You know, get the message, you stupid person. You know, and is that going to keep the attraction going? Because all that's happening between the two of you is saying, this is just not a fun place to be. You know, I didn't sign up for this to be talking about our problems all the time, or told that I'm not communicating. You know, what you want and what your spouse wants is to feel good. That's why you signed up for a relationship. So I often say a marriage is a mutual admiration society where your job is to make the other person feel good. And you can do that. Smile at them, compliment them, tell them they're great. Don't criticize them. Don't look at their faults, because their faults were already always there when you first met them. It's just you chose not to look at them. You don't need to look at them again. You know?
And it's so true. It's a choice, right? It's a choice where we focus our energy and what we focus on in ourselves and in others.
It's purely a habit. Are you in the habit of looking at the positive side of your spouse and complimenting them? Or are you in the habit, have you developed the habit of criticizing and not listening and taking them for granted and focusing on other things? Because this is what happens when you meet somebody and you fall in love and you say, I want to spend the rest of my life with them. That's where your focus is. So you put all that focus and attention on the relationship, and then you get married, and then life comes along and you have children and you have a career, or, you know, you buy a house and you have financial issues. So all of the focus and attention comes off that, and because you've got all this other stuff happening. But the people in great relationships, they always make sure, usually subconsciously, that their relationship is the most important thing. Everything else comes off that. Putting the good focus, keeping that relationship strong, that's their most important, that's their top priority, and it stays that way. And the beautiful part about that is when you do that, everything else is a lot better. Because here's the thing, you could be living under a bridge, homeless and an alcoholic, or maybe not an alcoholic. You could have nothing, but if you've got a good relationship, life is actually bearable. But conversely, you could have everything in the world, fancy house, cars, all the money, but if you've got a miserable relationship, you're not going to be happy. It's key is to get your relationship sorted.
It is. And it goes back to that analogy you had in the beginning of the crack in the wall, and, you know, making sure that you're built on a good foundation when it comes to your relationships. And, you know, that was me. That was my marriage. We had you had the nice house. We had the nice vehicles. We had everything on the outside. It looked picture perfect, but on the inside it was crumbling because we didn't have the foundation, you know. And so,
and you weren't
Liam,
happy.
Yeah, exactly. And I, you know, got to a point where if I'm getting criticized at my job, I come home, I'm getting criticized by my spouse. You just want to get away from it, you know? And so I think a lot of people will do that. They'll disconnect. And that's where I was. And so, you know, Liam, we talked about a lot today, and I want you to share a little bit about some of the programs and the services that you provide for people who may be going through some of this right now. This may be touching a soft spot with some people.
Right. excuse me. Yes, well, I've got quite a few different products and services that can help people. I've got a 30-day program and a 7-day program, which are both about helping you to recover your marriage from divorce. So if you're facing divorce, if you're really facing a crisis in your marriage, both of these programs help you do what I've really been talking about, which is to re-establish the foundations. So they're not about working on the problems, they're about working on the foundations and really understanding what you can do to heal that marriage, and they're very effective. And I have another program which I've recently published or brought out called The 9 Habits of Great Relationships. And remember, we've been talking about the difference between great relationships, what people do, and the ones that don't. And I've distilled it down into 9 habits. And this program shows you not only what these habits are, but how you can actually turn them into habits, because you want to make them just the thing you do without thinking. You automatically, whatever it is, do something that improves your relationship rather than automatically criticizing or doing things that don't. So it's not just good enough to know what they are. You have to turn them into a habit. And that really transforms that will transform any marriage pretty much.
Yeah, because you're using the subconscious mind, right?
You can't do it by thinking about it. You can't go, well, what should I do now? I know, I haven't bought her some flowers in 6 years. I'll go and buy her some flowers.
And she's like, wait, what did you do wrong? Why are you coming to me with flowers?
Yeah. And I also have a book that I've just published called, which you mentioned earlier, Marriage Uncounseling. Because again, I think what a lot of what I've been talking about, people think, I hope they think, and I know they will think, that's a really good idea, and it makes such common sense. I've never thought about it like that. But and that's what this book is about, is showing you all of the things that actually do work, that are common sense, but are the opposite to what we've been led to believe about relationships. That's why I call it counseling.
So it's like, I know at the end of my marriage, I would have done anything. It's like, let's just see what we can do to make this work. So, there could be people at that point right now that are like, I want to try something new. I want to, reprogram myself, and I want to bring my marriage back from the pits of despair or even your relationship, whatever it may be. And so, for those of you out there, definitely check out Liam's book. It's called Marriage Uncounseling, a counterintuitive approach to healing relationships and bringing back love. And so, Liam, where can people connect with you? What's your website? What's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, well, people can reach out through my website, which is simply my name, liamnaden.com. And all my programs are there. I have some podcasts. And if people want to reach out to me personally, if they like personal help, I do that as well. Because here's the thing, if I could just make this point, so many relationships, we've talked about maybe you're in the wrong relationship, but so many of them are actually the right relationship. And I think there's only one thing more tragic than a marriage ending too late, and that's a marriage ending when it shouldn't have never ended at all. And it's really just about a different understanding that can help you decide and know, is this really the right relationship for me? And a lot of the people that I work with who do my programs, they realize that it is. And the only thing that's stopping them from having the relationship they signed up for and that they really want to continue is they've just gone off track. They've just, we go down this path of relationships. No one's guiding us, like life in general, and we're expected to make it all work and everything. But maybe all they needed was just a little bit of guidance, seeing things in a different way, doing a few different things to fulfill the dream of what is the ideal relationship for them. So it's tragic when when the ideal relationships or the right relationships actually end. And that's what, I'm not trying to say everything that all of my work is about showing people they're in the wrong relationship, because it's tragic when people stay in the wrong relationship, but it's also, I think, more tragic when people leave the right relationship, when just a little bit more information, looking at things a different way, would have made it work for them.
Yeah. And so, do you have any advice for people that, they can tell if they're staying too long in the wrong relationship or if they're leaving too soon from the right relationship?
Well, the key is to remove fear, because as we talked about earlier about the brain, the brain does funny things to you when you feel afraid. It is a biological function that the brain has. It's designed to do something, when you're afraid, but it shuts down your awareness. So when you feel even subconscious fear that you're not really aware of, you can't see things in the right way. So that's the most important thing to do, is to remove your fear, and then you can see the perspective. Now, and one of the ways we know this is true is because maybe you have a friend who's struggling in their marriage, and they come to you and you explain it all, you can see very clearly what they should do. You could say to them, look, you're in the wrong marriage, or, you two guys, don't give up. You used to be great, and I can feel that you are still great, but you've just lost your way a bit. You know exactly what they should do, but they can't see it.
Mm-hmm.
And, so if you say to them, you're in the wrong marriage, you've been there for 20 years, you're miserable, you're just not compatible, you're not suited to each other. And they'll say to you, oh no, I'll never give up. I can make this work. It just needs a little bit more effort. I just need to do a few more different things. And I love the person and they're great. And, and you're saying to them, no, all you're doing, you can't, and you think, why are they saying this? Why are they making all these justifications? Their brain is not allowing them to see the truth because they're in a state of fear about that relationship. You can see the truth because you have no fear about it. You're not emotionally attached to it. So this is how the brain actually works. It creates a different state which affects your perception, and you can't see the truth. So this is, if you like, the foundation of everything, is to work on your own individual fears so that you can live a life where you can see the truth about yourself and about your situation, about what you should and shouldn't do. Your brain will allow you to do that. But when you're in a fearful state, it can't.
Wow, that's very powerful. That's very powerful. I recently had a friend who, she was married for 15 years, and through the whole marriage, I was telling her, this isn't the right fit. This isn't the right fit. And she just didn't want to let go. It was her third marriage. And so there was a fear there, but now she's divorced now. And she's like, why did you let me, do it that long? And I'm like, well, you weren't, she wasn't at a point where she could even process what I was telling her. But now, I'm like, okay, well, let's take that relationship and let's learn from it. Let's see what we can do to help you, so then you can attract someone, closer to what you want, in a relationship. So it's funny because sometimes, if you're sitting there telling your friend this isn't right for you, they may not even be in that frequency to even grasp it.
They can't be if they're in a state of fear, because their brain is not allowing them to see what you see. Yeah. This is a biological survival mechanism at work. It's a bit like, I'm not sure if I mentioned this last time, but fear is like hydrochloric acid. If you were to drink hydrochloric acid, it's going to destroy your body, because you understand what hydrochloric acid is. And if someone else came to you and said, drink this hydrochloric acid, I'll give you $10 million, and it won't harm you because it's, if you believe, if you have faith and you have positive thinking, and you'll be fine. You say, look, that's not how the process works. It's a mechanical process where a chemical destroys my body. That's what hydrochloric acid is. And it doesn't matter how justified or whatever reason you might want to think, it's going to destroy you. And it's the same with fear. Fear literally is a chemical that goes into your body that has an effect that's going to destroy your life. It's going to give you problems, and it's going to not make things work. So it doesn't matter, people say, well, it's all very well for you, say, get rid of your fear, but I've got all these problems and all these terrible things are going on in my life. I can't get rid of fear. And the point is, yes, you can. And that's what I teach. It's how to do it. So if you don't think you can get rid of fear, get hold of me, because you can. But not only that, you must, because it's the fear itself that is having a physical effect on the mechanism of your life. It's not about your situation. It's about the pure mechanics of what fear does that will mean you'll never achieve what you really want to, and you'll never reach your full potential. It's a physical impossibility.
Yeah, and you're never going to find that elation, that joy, that happiness, because you're living in a state of fear. And who wants to live, their lives like that? I think we get to a certain point where, we realize, that we are living in a state of fear. And then we say, I don't want to do this anymore. And I think a lot of the world right now, I think you and I have disconnected quite a bit. I think we were living our lives and we're having fun and enjoying everything that this world has to offer us. And there's a lot of people, though, in the world who are living in a state of fear right now. And so for those of you out there who, resonate with Liam, reach out to him. He can definitely help in these areas, whether it's helping with the brain and the subconscious, or overcoming fears, or, helping with your relationships in your marriage. Liam he wears many hats, and he's got a lot of talents and skills. And so check out his website, liamnaden.com. And thank you, Liam, for coming on the show. And I really thank you for, the energy that you bring and bringing hope to those who may have lost that love and feeling, because not all of you out there have lost that. You might be able to get it back. So hopefully there was some information in this show today that could help you. And if not, then reach out to Liam and get some more guidance on that.
Thank you very much, Tonya. It's been great talking to you. Thank you.
You deserve to navigate your life in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.theexistentialempath.com.